My daughter said, "I won't defend you anymore. My husband is tired of your drama." I just smiled. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just took a sip of my champagne, felt the bubbles burst on my tongue, and watched my daughter clutch her husband's arm like a lifeline. Chloe didn't know that the drama she was referring to was the only thing keeping her husband out of federal prison. To the world, I am Serena Vance, the retired grandmother who bakes cookies and hosts charity galas in her garden. But in D.C., among the people who actually matter, I am known as the silencer. For 30 years, I fixed the messes of the city's elite. I buried scandals, negotiated with blackmailers, and scrubbed reputations until they shined like new pennies. I retired 3 years ago for one reason: to help Mark, my ambitious son-in-law, run for city council. I opened my Rolodex for him. I let him use my mansion for his fundraisers. I made him. Tonight was his biggest night. The Save the Youth Gala. 500 wealthy donors were currently in my ballroom, drinking my vintage wine and writing checks for Mark's campaign. But 10 minutes ago, I had walked into the catering kitchen to check the hors d'oeuvres. I found Mark's phone unlocked on the counter. I shouldn't have looked. But old habits die hard. A fixer always checks the perimeter. I saw a notification from the campaign finance app. Transfer successful, $12,000 to Emerald Jewelers. I opened the transaction. The note read, "Vintage diamond anklet. Delivery to Apt 4B." Apartment 4B wasn't where my daughter lived. It was where Mark's campaign intern, a 22-year-old named Jessica, lived. He wasn't just cheating. He was embezzling charity funds to pay for it. I waited for him in the butler's pantry. When he walked in, flushed with adrenaline and expensive scotch, I held up the phone. "You're sloppy, Mark," I said calmly. "Using the charity account? That's a federal crime, not just a marital one." Mark didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. "Oh, give it a rest, Serena," he snapped, snatching the phone. "I'll put it back after the fundraiser check's clear. You're always hovering, always checking. It's suffocating." "It's not hovering," I said. "It's quality control. You are a liability." "I am the candidate," Mark shouted, his voice echoing into the hallway. "I am the face of this family. Not you. You're just a bitter old woman who misses the spotlight." That was when the door swung open. Chloe rushed in. She was wearing the silk gown I bought her, looking terrified. "What is happening?" she cried. "Mark, people can hear you. Your mother is doing it again." Mark lied instantly, pointing a finger at me. "She's accusing me of stealing. She's trying to ruin my big night because she's jealous that I'm the one in charge now." I looked at Chloe. I waited for her to ask me for the truth. I waited for her to remember the 3 times I had saved Mark's career from DUI charges. But she didn't look at me. She looked at Mark, handsome, charismatic Mark. She chose the lie because the truth was too painful. She turned to me, her face twisting into a mask of resentment. "Mom, enough," she said. "Chloe, he stole. I don't care." She interrupted, her voice shaking. "I won't defend you anymore. Mark is tired of your drama. You need to leave the advisory board." Tonight, Mark smirked behind her shoulder. A victorious, arrogant smirk. They thought my supervision was drama. They didn't realize it was a dam holding back a flood of sewage. "You want me to stop helping?" I asked softly. "Yes," Chloe shouted. "You want me to be just a spectator? God, yes." Mark laughed. I looked at the receipts in my hand. I looked at the ungrateful daughter I had protected for too long. I folded the receipt and put it in my pocket. "Very well," I smiled. It was the smile I used to give clients right before I billed them triple for a rush job. I resign. Effective immediately. I walked past them, patting Mark on the shoulder. Good luck, Councilman. You're going to need it. People often mistake peace for the absence of war, but in my world, peace is just a war that someone else is fighting for you. For 5 years, Chloe and Mark lived in a peaceful bubble, blissfully unaware that the bubble was made of Kevlar, and I was the only one holding it up. Now, I was putting it down. The morning after the gala, Chloe arrived at my study to collect the campaign materials, wearing a power suit that looked ridiculous on someone who had never negotiated anything harder than a latte order. She demanded login codes and press lists with an arrogance that was almost impressive, dismissing the single USB drive I handed her as small compared to the 40 hours a week I supposedly spent on the campaign. When I told her the data was small but the diplomacy was what took time, she rolled her eyes and told me they didn't need a fixer, just transparency. I watched her drive away, tasting the irony of her words, and whispered that she should be careful what she wished for, because transparency works both ways. As soon as she was gone, I opened my laptop and logged into my private encrypted banking portal, where 3 automatic monthly payments were set up under consulting fees. One to the freelance journalist who buried Mark's DUI stories, one to the bot farm that drowned out negative comments on his social media, and the most expensive one, a $4,000 rent payment for apartment 4B where his mistress lived. I hovered the mouse over the Cancel All button, hesitating for a fraction of a second, not out of guilt, but out of pity for the hurricane I was about to unleash on my own child. However, the memory of her voice telling me Mark was tired of my drama hardened my resolve, and I clicked the button, watching the screen flash green as I let transparency finally flood their lives. The first crack appeared 10 days later when, without the bot farm filtering his social media, Mark's comment section became a cesspool of real voters asking real questions. Without me there to confiscate his phone at 2 a.m., Mark got into a Twitter fight with a constituent about pothole repairs, tweeting that maybe if they paid more taxes instead of whining, the roads would be fixed. The next morning, Chloe called me in a panic, shrieking that someone had hacked Mark's account and begging me to use my old contacts at Twitter to take the post down. I calmly buttered my toast and reminded her that I had resigned and was now just a spectator, suggesting that perhaps Mark should issue an apology or she could defend him herself since she claimed to be so good at it. 3 days later, the structural collapse began when a repo man arrived at their house not for a car, but to serve a legal notice because the campaign card Mark used to buy the diamond anklet had been declined without my personal funds topping it up. I watched from behind my garden hedges as Chloe read the document, her face turning white. But instead of coming to me for help, she and Mark chose a nuclear option I hadn't anticipated. That evening, I turned on the TV to see Mark holding an emergency press conference, with Chloe standing by his side like a tragic heroine, where he looked grave and announced to the city that the recent financial irregularities and erratic tweets were not his doing, but the result of his campaign manager, me, suffering from cognitive decline. I stopped pruning my roses and stared at the screen as Mark gaslighted the entire electorate, claiming they had tried to protect my dignity, but I had become vindictive and mismanaged funds due to my mental state. Then Chloe stepped to the microphone, looking directly into the camera and confirming the lie, asking the public to forgive the confusion her sick mother had caused. The silence in my living room was absolute. They hadn't just fired me or insulted me. They had declared war by using the reputation I spent 30 years building as a shield to cover their own incompetence. I walked to my desk, opened the safe hidden behind a painting, and retrieved a single black USB drive that contained every secret I had ever buried for them. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias Thorne, the investigative journalist I used to thwart, telling him that, despite the news reports, I was feeling remarkably sharp and that he should meet me in an hour with a very large hard drive because it was time to let the truth out of its cage. The lie, once told, traveled faster than light. Mark didn't stop at the press conference. He went on a media blitz. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had once cooked him victory dinners, and watched him on Good Morning D.C. He sat on a beige sofa, holding Chloe's hand. He wore a soft blue sweater, abandoning his usual sharp suits to look more vulnerable and approachable. "It's a tragedy," Mark said to the sympathetic host, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye. "We noticed the signs about 6 months ago. The erratic spending, the paranoid accusations." Serena started imagining conspiracies everywhere. "That must be so hard for you, Chloe," the host cooed. The camera zoomed in on my daughter. She looked down at her lap, performing the role of the grieving daughter perfectly. "It is," Chloe whispered. We tried to handle it privately. But when she started sabotaging Mark's campaign, we had to step in. "We are looking into conservatorship options now, for her own safety." Conservatorship. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. They weren't just trying to destroy my reputation. They were planning to seize my assets and lock me away legally. They wanted to strip me of my agency so I couldn't testify against them when the embezzlement charges eventually surfaced. It was a brilliant move. Evil, but brilliant. I would have been proud of Mark if I wasn't busy plotting his destruction. I turned off the TV. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't issue a statement. Instead, I went to my closet. I bypassed my signature Chanel suits. I put on a nondescript trench coat, a scarf, and dark sunglasses. I wasn't Serena Vance, the socialite. I was the silencer again. And I had a meeting to attend. The underground bar was exactly as I remembered it, smelling of stale beer, regret, and secrets. It was a place where politicians made deals they couldn't speak of in the capital. I walked to the back booth, the one furthest from the door. A man was already there, nursing a bourbon. Elias Thorne. He was 60, disheveled, with ink stains on his fingers, and a cynical glint in his eyes. He had spent the last 20 years trying to expose the very people I protected. We were natural enemies who shared a mutual respect for the game. "Well, well," Elias grunted as I slid into the booth. "If it isn't the Mad Queen herself. Should I be worried you're going to throw a drink in my face? I heard your cognitive faculties are declining." "Don't believe everything you watch on TV, Elias," I said, signaling the bartender for a sparkling water. "Mark is a terrible actor, but the public loves a sob story." "They do," Elias agreed. "His poll numbers are up 4 points since he announced your illness. Sympathy vote is a powerful drug." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "So, why call me? You spent decades blocking my stories. You threatened to sue my paper into oblivion in '98. Why should I help you now?" "Because you hate liars, Elias," I said, "and you hate mediocre politicians who think they are smarter than the system." I reached into my bag and pulled out the black USB drive. I placed it on the sticky table between us. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "A confession?" "A roadmap," I corrected. "For years, I cleaned up Mark's messes. I deleted emails. I paid off witnesses. I scrubbed hard drives." Elias scoffed. "So you're an accomplice?" "I was a mother-in-law trying to protect her family," I said sharply. "But I kept copies of everything." I tapped the USB drive with a manicured fingernail. Inside this drive are the bank statements proving he used the Save the Youth Charity Fund to pay for jewelry. There are the police reports from his DUI in 2019 that I had buried. And there is the lease agreement for apartment 4B in Georgetown. Elias raised an eyebrow. Apartment 4B? The Love Nest, I said dryly. Paid for by campaign donors. The tenant is a 22-year-old intern named Jessica. I believe she is currently very upset because her rent check bounced this morning. Elias picked up the drive. He weighed it in his hand like it was a gold bar. This is a kill shot, Serena, he said. If I run this, Mark goes to prison. Chloe gets dragged through the mud. Your family name is Toast. My family name is already Toast. Elias, I said, my voice cold. They burned it this morning on national television to save their own skins. I looked him in the eye. I don't want you to write a hit piece. I want you to write the truth. Verify every document. Interview the intern. Follow the money. And what do you get out of it? Elias asked. Revenge? Retirement, I said. I'm tired of being the villain, Elias. I think it's time I let the world see who the real villains are. Elias pocketed the drive. He signaled for another drink. Mark is holding a town hall meeting tomorrow night, Elias noted, a cruel smile forming on his lips. The grand finale of his campaign. Live broadcast. I know, I smiled back. I plan to be there. It's going to be a bloodbath. Elias chuckled. No, I corrected him. It's going to be a civics lesson. I stood up to leave. One more thing, Elias. Yeah? The intern, Jessica. She doesn't know Mark is married to a saint. She thinks he's separated. If someone were to tell her that Mark used her rent money to buy his wife a reconciliation gift, she might be very motivated to speak. Elias raised his glass to me. You're terrifying, Serena. I'm just a spectator, I said, tying my scarf. Enjoy the reading material. I walked out of the bar and into the bright afternoon sun. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. Mom, the lawyers are drafting the conservatorship papers. Please don't make this difficult. It's for your own good. We love you. I looked at the text. For my own good, I whispered. I deleted the message. The shield was gone. The sword was drawn. And tomorrow night, at the town hall, Mark Sterling was going to find out that you never, ever fire the person who knows where the bodies are buried. While Mark was busy playing the victim on talk shows, Elias Thorne was busy doing what he did best, pulling loose threads until the whole sweater unraveled. I stayed home, playing the role of the confused, retired grandmother. I gardened, I drank tea. I didn't answer the phone. But my burner phone, the cheap prepaid device I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book, was buzzing every hour with updates from Elias. Update 1. The money trail. Elias verified the bank transfers. It wasn't just the jewelry. Mark had been siphoning money from the Save the Youth Foundation for 18 months, steak dinners, hotel suites in the city, and the rent for apartment 4B. It's a slam dunk, Serena, Elias texted. But we need a face. Documents are boring. Voters need a villain and a victim. Update 2. The girl. Jessica. The intern. Elias tracked her down at a coffee shop near the university. She wasn't a femme fatale. She was a 22-year-old political science student who thought she was in love with the next Kennedy. According to Elias, she was crying into her latte. Mark had called her that morning. He didn't break up with her. He told her, "My crazy mother-in-law froze the accounts. You need to lay low. Don't go to the apartment. I'll fix this after the election." He was keeping her on the hook. Just in case he survived the scandal, he wanted her waiting. That was Mark's fatal flaw. He was greedy. He wanted the wife, the career, and the mistress. I texted Elias back. Show her the Zillow listing. 10 minutes later, Elias showed Jessica a printout. It was a real estate listing for a luxury villa in the Caribbean. It was the property Mark and Chloe had been browsing online last week. Elias told her, "He isn't planning to leave his wife for you, Jessica. He's planning to take his wife on a victory vacation with the money he stole, using your name on the lease. When the FBI comes, they won't look at Mark. They'll look at the name on the apartment rental agreement. You. The fear did what love couldn't. It woke her up. Jessica didn't want to go to prison for a man who bought his wife diamond earrings while his mistress got an eviction notice. She's in, Elias texted. She wants immunity. I told her the only way to get it is to go public before the indictment drops. The visit. That evening, the doorbell rang. It was Chloe. She didn't come alone. She brought a lawyer, a slippery man named Mr. Henderson, who specialized in elder law. They sat in my living room. Chloe wouldn't look me in the eye. "Mom," she said, her voice tight. "This is Mr. Henderson. He's helping us with the transition." Mr. Henderson slid a thick stack of papers across the coffee table. Petition for temporary conservatorship. "Mrs. Vance," the lawyer said smoothly, "given the recent public incidents, Mark and Chloe believe it is in your best interest to hand over control of your financial assets and legal decisions to them, just until you're feeling better." I looked at the papers. They wanted everything: my bank accounts, my property, even the right to choose my own attorney. If I signed this, or if a judge granted it, I would be powerless. I looked at Chloe. "Is this what you want, Chloe?" I asked softly. "To own me." "We're protecting you!" Chloe snapped, finally looking up. Her eyes were full of tears, but they were tears of frustration, not sadness. "You're out of control, Mom. You're threatening Mark's career. Just sign the papers. Stop the drama." I picked up a pen. Mark needed to feel safe. He needed to believe the threat was neutralized, so he would walk into the town hall meeting arrogant and unprepared. "I understand," I said, my voice sounding weak and defeated. I flipped to the last page. I didn't sign Serena Vance. I signed SV. A signature I used for non-binding drafts, something any forensic handwriting expert would throw out in court later. But to Chloe, it looked like victory. "Thank you, Mom," she exhaled, snatching the papers. "You won't regret this." "I'm sure I won't." I smiled. "Oh, and Mom," Chloe added, standing up, "tomorrow is the town hall. Don't come. It's going to be loud and crowded. Stay here. Rest." "Of course," I said. "I'll just watch it on TV." They left. I watched their car disappear down the driveway. They thought they had just locked the lion in the cage. They didn't check the lock. I went back to my study. I pulled out the black dress I had bought in Paris 10 years ago. It was severe, elegant, and intimidating. It was my funeral dress. I texted Elias one last time. "The stage is set. Bring the girl to the venue at 7:15 p.m. I'll handle security." Elias replied, "It's showtime." The trap was primed. Mark thought he was walking into a coronation. He was walking into an execution. The City Hall auditorium was packed to capacity. 700 people filled the velvet seats. Balloons in Mark's campaign colors, navy blue and gold, bobbed against the high ceiling. A giant banner hung behind the stage. Mark Sterling. Integrity. Family. Future. I stood at the back of the hall, concealed by the shadows of the mezzanine. I adjusted my black leather gloves. I watched my son-in-law on stage. He was in his element. The lights caught the shine of his teeth as he smiled. He wasn't wearing a tie, a calculated choice to look relatable to the working class he secretly despised. Chloe sat a few feet behind him, hands folded in her lap, looking at him with a gaze that was half adoration, half terror. "My opponent wants to talk about budgets." Mark boomed into the microphone, his voice echoing with practiced passion. "But I want to talk about values. I want to talk about the sanctity of the home. Because if a man cannot govern his own house with love and transparency, He cannot govern this city. The crowd erupted in applause. Transparency? I whispered to myself. Careful, Mark. I walked toward the main aisle. 2 large security guards blocked my path. They were wearing earpieces and looked bored. One of them stepped forward. Ma'am, this area is full. You'll have to, he stopped. He squinted. Mrs. Vance? I smiled. It was Tony. I had hired him 5 years ago to guard Mark's first fundraiser. I had paid for his daughter's braces when his insurance denied the claim. Hello, Tony, I said softly. I see Mark is keeping you busy. I thought you were sick, Tony stammered, looking uncomfortable. The briefing said you weren't allowed entry. Security risk. Do I look like a security risk, Tony? I asked, smoothing my trench coat. I'm just a mother-in-law coming to see her family's big moment. I promise I won't make a scene. Unless you stop me. Tony looked at the stage, then back at me. He remembered who signed the checks for years. He stepped aside. Front row is reserved, Mrs. Vance. But there's an empty seat near the press pit. Thank you, Tony. I walked down the center aisle. The lights were focused on the stage, so the crowd was in darkness. Nobody noticed me at first, but as I got closer to the stage, the light spilled over. I took my seat in the second row, right directly in Mark's line of sight. I took off my sunglasses. I unbuttoned my coat to reveal the severe, elegant black dress underneath. I crossed my legs and waited. Mark was in the middle of a joke about property taxes. And that's why I say, keep the change. He laughed. The crowd laughed with him. Then, Mark looked down. He saw me. The laugh died in his throat. It sounded like a car engine sputtering out. He froze for a full 2 seconds, an eternity in public speaking. His eyes widened. He looked at the side of the stage where Tony was standing. He looked furious. Chloe followed his gaze. When she saw me, she physically recoiled. Her hand flew to her mouth. I didn't wave. I didn't scowl. I just smiled. A polite, encouraging smile. The kind of smile a shark gives before it drags you under. Mark stammered. He tapped the microphone nervously. Excuse me. As I was saying. He tried to recover. He tried to find his rhythm, but the spell was broken. Every time he looked at the audience, his eyes darted back to me. He was waiting for me to scream, to throw something, to act like the crazy old woman he had painted me as. But I did nothing. My silence was louder than his microphone. It was making him sweat. I could see the beads forming on his forehead. We have time for a few questions, Mark announced abruptly, cutting his speech short by 10 minutes. He needed to get off that stage. Let's open the floor. Chloe leaned forward and whispered loudly. Mark! I can handle it, Mark hissed back, his mic catching the friction in his voice. He pointed to a friendly-looking man in the third row. A plant, obviously. Yes, sir. You with the red hat. The man stood up. Councilman, what is your plan for the new park? Softball question. Mark relaxed. Great question. We are going to build the biggest playground this city has ever seen. Applause. Mark's shoulders dropped. He thought he was safe. Next question, Mark shouted, feeling confident again. Let's hear from the young lady in the back. You in the gray hoodie. I turned my head slightly. Standing near the exit, holding a microphone that Elias had maneuvered into her hand, was a young woman. She pulled down her hood. She had dark circles under her eyes. She looked terrified, but determined. Mark squinted against the stage lights. Then he recognized her. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. It was Jessica, Councilman Sterling. Jessica said. Her voice shook, but the microphone amplified it into a thunderclap. My name is Jessica Miller. I was an intern for your campaign last summer. The room went quiet. The word intern in politics usually signals disaster. I don't have a question about parks, Jessica continued, reading from a piece of paper Elias had written for her. I have a question about housing. Mark gripped the podium. Miss, if you have a specific inquiry, my staff, can I live in apartment 4B on Elm Street? Jessica interrupted. Or I did, until my rent check bounced yesterday. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Why did it bounce, Councilman? Jessica asked, looking straight at him. Was it because the account ending in 5,490, the Save the Youth charity account, was frozen? Chloe stood up. Cut her mic, she screamed. She's a plant. Cut her mic. But the sound guy was an old friend of Elias. The mic stayed on. And one more thing, Jessica said, her voice gaining strength. That diamond anklet you bought for your wife's apology gift? Why is the receipt in my trash can? Chaos. Absolute, beautiful chaos. The reporters in the pit, who had been half asleep, suddenly jumped to their feet. Cameras flashed like lightning. Is this true, Councilman? Did you use charity funds? Who is she? Mark stood there, mouth open, looking for someone to save him. He looked at Chloe. She was sobbing, covering her face. He looked at his campaign manager. He was on the phone, probably with a lawyer. Finally, instinctively, Mark looked at me. He looked at the empty seat next to me where the silencer used to sit. He pleaded with his eyes. Fix this. You always fix this. I looked back at him. I tapped my wrist, mimicking checking a watch. Time's up, Mark. Then my phone buzzed. It was the notification I had been waiting for. Elias had hit publish. The article was live, and the phones in the audience started to light up, one by one, like fireflies in a graveyard. The silence following Jessica's accusation lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, the sound began. It started with a single ping from a cell phone in the front row. Then another. Then 10. Then hundreds. It sounded like a swarm of digital locusts descending on the auditorium. Elias Thorne had timed the release perfectly. The notification hit every news app, every social media feed, and every inbox in the city simultaneously. Breaking. Councilman Sterling, accused of embezzlement, adultery, and elder abuse. The Sterling fraud. Full investigative report inside. I watched as 700 heads bent down to look at their glowing screens. The auditorium, once bathed in warm campaign lights, was now illuminated by the cold, blue, ghastly glow of smartphones. What is that? Mark shouted, his voice cracking. What are you reading? Put your phones away. Listen to me. Nobody listened. They were too busy scrolling through the PDF receipts Elias had uploaded. Oh my God! A woman in the third row gasped, covering her mouth. He spent $5,000 of the orphan fund on a weekend at the Ritz? He tried to have his mother-in-law committed? A man shouted from the balcony. Read the emails. He calls her the bank. Hey, Sterling! A donor yelled, standing up and waving his phone. Is this why my check was cashed by a shell company? Mark looked around wildly. He looked like a captain on a ship that had just been torpedoed, trying to plug the holes with his bare hands. It's a lie! Mark screamed into the microphone, the feedback screeching painfully. It's a deepfake. My opponents are hacking you. Don't believe it. He turned to Chloe. Chloe, tell them it's your mother. She's doing this. She's sick. Chloe didn't move. She was holding her own phone. Her face was illuminated by the screen. She wasn't looking at the embezzlement charges. She was looking at the text messages between Mark and Jessica. Text from Mark. August 12. Don't worry about the wife. She's clueless. Just a prop for the photos. You're the one I want. Text from Mark. September 4. I'll use the campaign card for your rent. Serena covers the audit. She always cleans up my mess. I saw the moment Chloe's soul shattered. She had sold her mother down the river to protect a man who called her a prop. She looked up from the phone. Her mascara was running. She looked at Mark. "A prop?" she whispered. The microphone picked it up. "Chloe, baby, don't read that," Mark pleaded, reaching for her. "It's out of context. It's fake. Don't touch me." Chloe shrieked, shoving him away. She stumbled back, tripping over her chair. She fell to the stage floor in a heap of silk and shame. The crowd went feral. Boos erupted. People started throwing campaign flyers onto the stage. "Fraud! Thief! Where's the money, Mark?" Mark stood alone center stage. The integrity banner behind him seemed to mock him. He looked for an exit. He looked for a scapegoat. He pointed a shaking finger at me in the second row. "Her!" he bellowed, his eyes bulging. "It's Serena! She's the mastermind. She cooked the books. She's setting me up because I fired her." He looked at the security guards. "Arrest her! Tony, arrest her! She hacked the system." Tony, the head of security, looked at Mark. Then he looked at me. I hadn't moved. I sat with my legs crossed, my face calm, watching the chaos with the detachment of a theater critic watching a bad play. Tony reached for his radio, but he didn't call for my arrest. "Dispatch," Tony said into his lapel mic. "We have a situation at City Hall. Requesting police assistance. Potential riot. And send the fraud unit. The suspect is on stage." Mark heard it. His knees buckled. He grabbed the podium to stay upright. The cameras were all on him now. Zoomed in on the sweat, the panic, the guilt. This was the image that would define him forever. Not the smiling candidate, but the cornered rat. I decided it was time to leave. The show was over. Only the cleanup remained, and I wasn't on the cleanup crew anymore. I stood up. In the chaos, people parted for me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They realized who I was. I wasn't the victim. I was the architect. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked up at Mark. He was looking down at me, tears streaming down his face. "Serena," he mouthed. "Help me." It was pathetic. After everything, he still thought I would fix it. He still thought he was entitled to my protection. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled receipt from the Save the Youth Gala, the one for the diamond anklet. I tossed it onto the stage. It fluttered down and landed at his feet. "You wanted transparency, Mark," I said, my voice cutting through the noise just enough for him to hear. "Now you have it." I turned to Chloe. She was still on the floor, weeping. "Mom?" she sobbed. I paused. Part of me wanted to run to her, to pick her up, to tell her it would be okay. But if I picked her up now, she would never learn to stand. "Call a lawyer, Chloe," I said simply. "And not one of mine." I turned my back on them. I buttoned my trench coat. I put my sunglasses back on. I walked up the center aisle, head high, heels clicking rhythmically against the floor. Behind me, the sound of police sirens grew louder, mixing with the angry roar of the crowd. I didn't look back. I pushed open the heavy double doors and walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It smelled like rain. It smelled like freedom. It has been 1 year since the sirens drowned out Mark's lies at City Hall. Mark pleaded guilty to wire fraud and embezzlement to avoid a public trial that would have humiliated him further. He is currently serving an 8-year sentence in a minimum security federal facility. I hear he works in the laundry room. It's the first honest work he's ever done. As for Chloe, she learned the hard way that a prop has no value when the stage collapses. The government seized their assets to pay back the charity. She lost the house, the cars, and her social standing. She works as a receptionist at a dental clinic now. She lives in a small apartment, ironically, not much bigger than the one Mark rented for his mistress. She came to visit me at my new beach house last weekend. She looked tired, wearing sensible shoes and no makeup. "I'm sorry," she said, standing on my deck, looking out at the ocean. "You were the shield, and I treated you like the enemy." "I know," I said. I poured her a cup of tea. I didn't offer to pay her rent. I didn't offer to introduce her to a rich suitor. I just offered her tea. She has to fix her own life now. That is the only way she will survive. As for me, my phone still rings sometimes. Senators, CEOs, and powerful men in D.C. calling for the silencer to come back and bury their secrets. I don't answer. I sit on my porch, listening to the waves crash against the rocks. The ocean is the only thing loud enough and wild enough to hold my attention now. I realize that you cannot save people who fall in love with their own chains. You can only break your own. I am no longer a fixer. I am no longer a spectator. I am just Serena. And for the first time in 30 years, the silence around me isn't a weapon. It's a gift. What about you? Have you ever had to step back and let someone you love fail so they could finally learn? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice. Until next time, protect your peace.